My daughter said, "You'll die alone anyway." So I quietly rewrote the will she found out at the reading. I woke up to the sound of her voice again, sharp, careless, cutting through the paper-thin walls of this nursing home like a cold knife through pine. "She'll die alone anyway," Carla said on the phone. Her tone was light, casual, like she was discussing the weather. "What's the point of keeping her around? She's just decaying, like old wood." I froze under my blanket, my hands gripping the thin cotton as if to keep from splintering. I stared at the water stain spreading across the ceiling. The pipes hummed, the heater rattled, and her words stayed hanging there, louder than everything else. It was my 74th birthday. The morning nurse had brought me a cupcake with a candle that wouldn't light. I laughed softly, because what else could I do? They bring cupcakes to residents on birthdays, though sometimes the candles refused to burn. When Carla came later that day, she didn't notice the cupcake. She was too busy holding her phone, scrolling, sighing. "I brought you something," she said, dropping a plastic bag onto the table beside my bed. Inside was a can of chicken soup, 3 sleeping pills, and an envelope. I unfolded the paper. "Legal language, property transfer. You just need to sign there, Mom," she said, tapping the line with her manicured nail. "It's easier if the house is under my name now. You don't need to worry about taxes or anything, really." I looked at her face, smooth, practiced, distant. The face of someone who had learned to smile only when it paid off. "Carla," I said quietly, "it's my birthday." She didn't even flinch. Her eyes flicked away, betraying nothing, turning toward the window, as if acknowledgement might cost too much emotion. "Right," she murmured, glancing at her watch. "Happy birthday, Mom. 74, huh? Time flies." She kissed the air near my cheek and went back to her phone. That's when she said it again, not realizing I could still hear, her voice floating just beyond the doorway as she spoke to her husband. "She'll die alone anyway. We might as well settle everything now. When it happens, I don't want to be dealing with paperwork." The door clicked shut. Silence filled the room, heavy and thick as sawdust. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I turned the envelope over in my hand. My fingers were stiff, my skin thin as rice paper. I built chairs meant to last lifetimes, shaped wood tough enough to outlive storms, heat, and time. Now my own daughter thought I would crumble faster than the cedar I worked with. I had not always been this quiet. Once, my voice could fill a workshop. Once, my hands could make beauty from splinters. Years of giving, years of swallowing my pride just to keep the peace. They sanded me down smooth. That day, though, something inside me caught fire again. The soup sat untouched. I could smell the cheap aluminum, the staleness of convenience. I pushed it aside and looked out the window. Snow was falling on the pines, slow and sure, each flake landing exactly where it belonged. My workshop used to smell like this time of year: resin, pine, varnish, warmth. I could almost hear the echo of my hammer, the hum of creation. I thought of the house Carla wanted, the little cottage in Wells, Maine, with the red-painted shutters and the wide porch her father built. The one I filled with laughter, with wood shavings, with my entire life's work. She hadn't lived there since college, but she wanted it now, not because it meant anything, only because it was worth something. She'd never understood the difference. When she was small, she'd sit in my lap while I carved, her hands resting on mine. I'd guide her fingers along the grain, teaching her to feel how the wood wanted to move. She'd giggle and say, "It's like magic, Mom." Somewhere along the way, she stopped believing in magic. She started believing in money. As the snow thickened, I reached for the photo frame on the nightstand, the one I'd kept for decades. It was us, the year her father died. My hair still dark, her smile still real. I touched the glass, my fingertips tracing the curve of her cheek. "You'll die alone anyway," she'd said. I whispered back, to no one, not yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls creaked with the cold. The nurse passed by, humming softly. I stared at the ceiling until dawn. At 6, I sat up, slipped my feet into the worn slippers beneath my bed, and found the number Emily had written on the back of a holiday card she sent last year. I had kept it hidden in the drawer, the one Carla never bothered to open. I dialed the number. "Emily?" I said when she answered. My voice was steady. "I need to update my will." The morning light broke through the blinds then, pale and clear, landing across my hands, the same hands that once built cradles, tables, chairs, hands that could still build one last thing, a reckoning. I was never a glamorous woman, never wore perfume, never owned more than 2 pairs of shoes at a time, never painted my nails. But my hands were strong. They bore calluses in the shape of chisels and smelled of linseed oil and cedar more often than not. Those hands built a life not just for me, but for Carla too. Every curve of a chair leg, every smooth grain I polished, every dovetail joint was part of our survival. And still, none of it was ever enough for her. I met Carla's father at a county fair in Cumberland. He was a sweet man with kind eyes and rough palms like mine. We had dreams of building a furniture shop together, but dreams can be delicate, and his ended too soon. A tractor slipped on black ice one winter, and the machine that could move trees crushed the man who taught me how to sand corners smooth. Carla was 6, I was 34, and suddenly, alone. After the funeral, I packed up our house and moved into a small cottage just outside of Wells, close enough to the trees, far enough from pity. I turned our old shed into a workshop and built everything I could with my grief: cribs, dressers, footstools, benches. The work was slow at first, but word spread. People started calling me the chair widow, which I hated. But the orders kept coming. It was hard, but it was honest. It paid the bills. And when I laid my head down at night, even if my bones ached, I slept knowing I had done something worthwhile. Carla never liked the smell of sawdust. She'd wrinkle her nose every time she walked into the shop. I tried to teach her once, carved her a little keepsake box with her initials in script, but she said it looked homemade and left it in the rain. When she was 12, she came home crying because some girl at school said her backpack smelled like old wood. I offered to buy her a new one, but she didn't want that. She wanted to be like the other kids, sleek, clean, modern. From that moment on, she stopped bringing friends to the house. She began to say things like, "Mom, why don't you get a real job?" Or, "You don't even make that much, do you?" I did not have the words then to tell her what it meant to create something with your hands, to feel the life inside the wood, to know your work would last longer than you. So I just nodded, wiped my hands on my apron, and kept going. When college applications came around, Carla set her sights on Boston. I was proud, but terrified. Tuition was more than I'd made in 5 years. But I sold off my antique tools, took extra orders, even taught classes at the community center to make up the difference. I carved custom rocking chairs for new mothers, anniversary benches for elderly couples, anything anyone wanted. I remember working until my wrists swelled so badly I could not hold a pencil. But I never told her that. She got in, first-generation college student. They called her a rising star. And when she introduced herself to new classmates, I found out later, she told them her mother was a retired artist. Not a woodworker, not a craftswoman, certainly not a carpenter. I suppose artist sounded better. Cleaner, more abstract, less dusty. She came home less and less after that. On the rare holidays she did visit, she'd stay in her room, windows closed to keep out the scent of the workshop. Once, I overheard her tell a friend on the phone, "It's like living in a lumber yard. Even the air smells like poverty." That one stung more than I expected. But I kept her school photo on my bench anyway. Every day, right beside my chisels, I even made a special stool for her graduation cherry wood, polished to a shine, with her initials carved into the base. She never sat on it. She took it, though, said she could find a use for it. I saw it in a photo once, years later, shoved in the corner of her apartment, used as a stand for some potted plant. Funny thing is, that was the most honest use of it. Something beautiful, strong, life-giving, holding up something fragile and temporary. That was our story, I suppose. I was the stool. She was the ivy. I did not hate her for it, but I never forgot. There are things I have kept quiet about not because I was ashamed, but because no one ever asked. And some things, I suppose, were too precious to hand over to a world that no longer valued patience or silence or craft. My grandfather was Japanese. He came to Maine after the war, quietly, with a suitcase full of hand tools and a head full of techniques that had no place in factories. He never spoke much English, but he taught me to listen to wood the way some people listen to music. He showed me how to read the grain like lines in a face, how to make joints so precise they held without nails or glue. He called it tsugite, hidden joinery. To him, a good chair did not need to scream its strength. You could feel it just by sitting down. That skill, the ability to make two pieces of wood become one without force, became my legacy. And like all true legacies, it was invisible to those who never looked beyond the surface. I have a small cedar box tucked beneath the floorboards of my old workshop back in Wells. Inside it are my grandfather's carving knives, still wrapped in the same cotton he folded 50 years ago. There is also a leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed and stained with oil and time. In that book are sketches for every major piece I have ever built, templates, measurements, joinery diagrams, grain maps. It is not worth anything to a bank, but to the right hands, it is everything. There is only one piece I ever signed in public, the rocking chair I made when Carla was born. I called it the Chair of Love, but the newspapers named it something else, the Mother's Silence. I carved it from a single slab of black walnut, polished it for weeks until it gleamed like riverstone. The backrest curves like arms, the seat wide enough for a mother and child. There is no hardware in it, no screws, no nails, just time and tension and care. It was selected for a craft exhibition in Portland in 1982, and for a moment, people cared. They clapped, took photos, wrote my name in print. Carla was 3 then. She does not remember any of it. Years later, when I offered her the chair for her new apartment, she said, "It doesn't match anything. It's too rustic." So I took it back, wrapped it in cotton like my grandfather once did. It sits in my workshop still, waiting. What Carla never knew and never asked was that the Maine Kyoto Woodworking Exchange reached out to me more than once. They wanted to buy the notebook. They offered a seat on their advisory board, even suggested turning my designs into teaching materials for apprentices. I declined, not because I doubted them, but because I was not ready to be seen again. You do not expose roots in winter. But then came Emily. She first came into my life as a quiet girl in a noisy classroom, a scholarship student with quiet hands and big eyes. While other children played with phones, she asked me about chisels. I taught her to sharpen a blade using nothing but a stone and water. She never forgot. Now, she is a lawyer, smart, ethical, fierce in that soft way that reminds me of good pine, flexible but unbreakable. She visits twice a month, brings me tea, news clippings, once even a carved spoon she made herself. She does not know everything, but she knows enough, and more importantly, she listens. Carla has never met her. She would not approve. Carla likes people with titles, with platforms, with curated LinkedIn profiles. Emily wears secondhand sweaters and keeps her phone on silent. I trust her. A few months ago, I showed her the notebook, watched her eyes widen as she flipped through it like scripture. She said, "You should protect this, Heather. People need to learn from this." And maybe she is right. Maybe this world still has room for old ways. Maybe not for me, but for someone. Someone who wants to build, not just buy. Who understands that a chair is not just a place to sit, but a place to belong. I have never had stocks, no inheritance from anyone but the calluses I earned myself. But I do have something, a name, a skill, a body of work that speaks without shouting. And soon, thanks to Emily, I will have a plan. Not everything I built was forgotten. Some things simply waited. The invitation arrived on thick paper, too fancy for Carla's usual taste, which meant it was more for show than sentiment. Promotion celebration, it read, with her name printed in gold foil and the date set for a Sunday afternoon. A note scrawled at the bottom in her neat, sharp script, "You should come." People will ask about family, Please don't wear anything dusty. Dusty. That was her word for my entire life. Still, I went. I put on my best sweater, the navy one with the wooden buttons I had carved myself. I tied back my hair and left the cane at home. I did not want to look frail in front of her friends. I did not want to be an embarrassment again. Her house in Boston was all polished marble, pale furniture, stainless steel, no wood in sight, except maybe the cold, processed kind that looks like it was printed on a machine. Everything felt hard and shiny and loud. A place made for photos, not people. When I arrived, the front door was open, but no one came to greet me. I wandered in quietly and found a server who pointed toward the back patio. "They said you're at table 6, he mumbled. Table 6 was a fold-out metal chair beside the trash bins, near a citronella candle and a wilting fern. The others were under shade canopies, sipping wine and laughing into their phones. I sat. Carla saw me eventually. She waved, 2 fingers, barely a smile. "Glad you made it," she called out, then turned back to her circle. She wore a silk pantsuit, bone white, with heels too high for her to walk naturally. Her voice was louder than I remembered, trained and firm, like someone who gave orders for a living. A few minutes later, someone handed her a phone. She laughed, tossed her hair back, and started recording a live stream. "And here we are," she said to the camera, panning around, "celebrating hard work, ambition, and roots." She turned the camera toward me. "Speaking of roots, this is my mother, the chairmaker. She still builds furniture by hand, believe it or not. Alone, in a shed, no internet, no central heating." Her friends laughed, and the comments on her live stream flashed across the screen. "Lol, not the lumber grandma. She looks like she carves spells, not chairs. Bet she smells like glue and secrets." Carla leaned closer to the phone. "I mean, look at her," she said. "Doesn't she just match the broken-down rocking chair we keep in the garage? What was it called? The love chair. Looks more like a termite feast now." I felt something cracknot in my body, but in the space between us. A silence too long ignored, now splitting wide open. Still, I did not speak. I looked at her, and for the first time, I did not see my daughter. I saw a stranger in borrowed polish. But it was not over yet. A moment later, my grandson 12, lanky, all elbows and attitude wandered into the frame. "Yo, is this the chair?" he asked, pointing to the rocker in the corner of the patio. I had made it 38 years ago, every curve carved with care, its joints invisible, its body still solid. He climbed into it with a smirk and turned to the phone. "Guys, I'm about to sit on a zombie chair. If it doesn't collapse, I'm immortal." He flopped backward, let the chair creak under his weight, then made exaggerated ghost sounds. "Ooh, it's haunted, smells like mothballs and dead dreams." Carla laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes. Then she looked at me and said, "You built that chair, right, Mom? Must have been a long time ago, back when you still believed love was enough." I didn't respond. I stood, slowly, my knees stiff from the cold metal chair. I walked over to the rocker, ran my hand along the armrest worn smooth by decades of waiting, and then I left. I did not say goodbye. The next morning, I called Emily. "I want to make some changes," I told her. She asked gently, "Are you sure?" I nodded, even though she could not see me. "Yes. It's time the things I built belong to people who understand their worth, not just their weight." There was a pause. "What do you need me to do?" And I said the words as calmly as I would plane a rough board. "Help me rewrite the will." Emily came 2 days after the party. She brought tea again, chamomile this time, and a folder tucked neatly beneath her arm. I had already cleared the small table in my room, laid out the old sketchbooks, the worn Socio notebook with my grandfather's faded diagrams, and the file labeled property deeds. She looked at everything, then at me. "You're really doing this," she said softly, not as a question, but as a quiet marvel. I nodded. "It's time," I said, "while I still have all my senses, and before she sells my name for Instagram likes." Emily gave a small smile, the kind that held more understanding than pity. "Tell me exactly what you want, Heather. I'll make it happen. So I told her. First, the most sacred. My grandfather's notebook, my own journals, sketches, diagrams, everything that belonged to the hidden craft. The tradition of tsugete had lived quietly in our family for generations, whispered through hands instead of words. I wanted it preserved, not sold, not buried. I wanted it taught, passed on, kept breathing. I want to give full custodianship of the designs and the technical records to the MAINE Kyoto Woodworking Exchange, I said, on the condition that they teach it to women. No gatekeeping, no exhibitions without education. Emily wrote it all down, her pen gliding with purpose. Next, the chair. The chair of love, I said, needs to go to the people. It's not hers. It was never hers. Carla had been born into it, but she never truly sat in it. Not with reverence, not with understanding. I want it donated to the MAINE State Museum, I continued, as a permanent piece, and not in the back corner labeled folk art. It goes in the Mothers of Maine exhibit. They reached out before. They'll take it. Emily raised an eyebrow. With a plaque? With a plaque, I confirmed, and I'll write the inscription myself. She paused to sip her tea, then glanced at the envelope I had tucked under the table's edge. And the rest? She asked. I reached for it. Inside were the documents for the cottage in Wells, the deed to my workshop, the balance of my savings account, and the last will I had written years ago, back when I still believed Carla might soften with time. I pushed the envelope toward her. Everything else, I said, goes into a new foundation. A fund. I want to call it Heather's Hands. It will provide scholarships, tools, and apprenticeships for young women, especially those who've been told they're too poor, too slow, or too dirty to matter. Girls like me. Like I was. Emily's eyes softened. You're building a new legacy. No, I said. I'm simply redirecting the one Carla chose to abandon. We worked through the details for hours. Every signature, every clause, every protection. I wanted no loopholes, no appeals, no forgotten provisions. I made it clear. Carla was to receive nothing. Not the house, not the land, not the chair, not even my tools. It was not spite. It was clarity. She told the world I was useless, I said. Now let her explain why my uselessness is building futures for 100 women she'll never meet. Emily leaned forward. She may contest it. She can try, I replied. But she won't win. Because I'm not senile. I'm not confused. I'm just done. By the time Emily left, the sun had dipped behind the pine trees, casting golden shadows across my windowsill. I sat in silence for a while, letting the quiet fill me like warm breath in cold wood. Then I reached for my old journal and wrote the plaque inscription in pencil first, just as I used to mark cuts before committing to the blade. The chair of love, carved by hands that knew silence, carried by a heart that outlasted noise. The next morning, I sealed everything in a fireproof box and handed it to Emily with both hands. She did not ask me if I was sure. She did not try to change my mind. She simply nodded, tucked it under her arm, and walked out the door. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without dreaming of splinters. The room was modern, glass-walled, sterile. A conference table stretched down the center like a runway for ego. Carla arrived 10 minutes late, sunglasses still on indoors, her phone glued to one hand and a tall iced coffee in the other. She did not notice the receptionist's attempt at a polite smile, nor the way Emily rose slightly when she entered. I hope this won't take long, Carla said, removing her sunglasses with a sigh. I've got a meeting across town. She sat at the head of the table, uninvited, and opened a leather folder. Inside were printouts, real estate listings, loan applications, transfer forms. She tapped her pen against the edge of the folder like a ticking clock. I assume we're here to finalize the transfer of the Wells property and any remaining assets, she said. I've already arranged to renovate the kitchen. The house is quaint, but it needs modernization. Emily didn't respond. She simply slid a thick envelope across the table and opened the binder in front of her. Before we begin, Emily said calmly, I'd like to remind everyone present that this is the formal reading and execution of the last will and testament of Heather Dawson. All statements have been notarized, witnessed, and legally filed. This version supersedes any and all previous versions. Carla raised an eyebrow. Oh, I'm sure. Mom probably wrote it when she still remembered where her workshop was. Emily didn't flinch. The testator was of sound mind and body, as confirmed by medical evaluation and legal oversight, including signed documentation from 2 licensed professionals. This will is final. Carla blinked but said nothing. The room quieted. Emily began. Item 1. The house located at 12 Woodrow Lane, Wells, Maine, including the workshop, the land it occupies, and all structures therein, is not to be transferred to the next of kin. Instead, it will be transferred in full to a non-profit entity established and funded by the Estate Heather's Hands Foundation. Carla's pen is still. Excuse me? She said. Emily continued, her voice unshaken. Item 2. The workshop contents, including all tools, materials, journals, and design archives, are hereby donated to the Maine Kyoto Woodworking Exchange, with the stipulation that they be used for the training and advancement of young female artisans, particularly those from underprivileged or marginalized backgrounds. Carla leaned forward, her voice rising. You can't be serious. That's family property. Emily turned a page. Item 3. The rocking chair known as the Chair of Love, originally built in 1982 and displayed briefly in the Portland Arts Council, is to be permanently housed in the Maine State Museum under the Mothers of Maine exhibit. The plaque will read, "A chair built for love, misused by legacy, restored by truth, a symbol for mothers once seen as burdens." Carla's jaw tightened. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. This is insane. She didn't even like museums. She didn't talk to anyone but birds for the last 10 years. Emily didn't blink. Heather Dawson's final statement is to be viewed now. She reached for the remote, and the screen behind her came alive. There, in the soft morning light, sat Heather Dawson. Her hair pinned back, her hands folded neatly in her lap, and her voice quiet but clear. If you're watching this, Carla, then you know the choices have been made. You may feel betrayed, but ask yourself, when was the last time you sat with me without needing something? When was the last time you asked me who I was, not what I could give you? The video paused briefly, then continued. I carved that chair for you. Each curve was shaped during nights when I couldn't sleep from worry. It was meant to hold you, to remind you that love doesn't have to shout. But you didn't just ignore it. You mocked it. You filmed yourself laughing at it, laughing at me. Heather's eyes were steady on the screen. Carla, I gave you my hands, my years, my bones, and you gave the world a performance. So now, the things I built, the things that matter, will go to those who still believe in building. The video ended. The room was silent. Carla pushed her chair back violently, the legs scraping the floor. Her voice cracked. She was senile. This isn't real. She was confused. You, she pointed at Emily. You manipulated her. Emily closed the binder and folded her hands. There are video recordings, medical evaluations, third-party witnesses, and a digital chain of custody for every signature. If you contest, you'll lose, and it will be public. Carla stood, trembling, then slammed her folder shut. You're ruining everything, she hissed. No, Emily said softly, standing as well. She just made sure you don't ruin her legacy. Carla left without saying another word. The room, once filled with assumptions and entitlement, was now empty, but for Emily and the paper Heather had signed with hands that once held worlds together. The first ripple came from a phone screen. Someone at Carla's promotion party had recorded the live stream, the one where she mocked me, called me a relic, and laughed as her son turned my chair into a joke. I do not know who uploaded it or why they did. Perhaps guilt, perhaps justice. But within hours of the will reading, the clip began to circulate. It started on a local Facebook group for artisans in Maine, then it jumped to Reddit, then Twitter, and from there, it was wildfire. The video, now captioned, number, Chair of Shame. This is how she treated the woman who raised her, had over 4 million views in 48 hours. Comment sections were brutal. I've never wanted to hug a chair before, but here we are. She used her mom like a prop, then got shocked when she lost the inheritance. Classic. This woman should be banned from owning furniture, period. The hashtag, #ChairOfShame, trended nationwide for 3 straight days. Strangers, carpenters, single moms, retirees, college students posted photos of old furniture they had inherited, sharing what those pieces meant to them. Rocking chairs became a symbol, an emblem of quiet sacrifice and generational love. News anchors referenced the story as the MAINE legacy scandal. Think pieces flooded in, what we owe our elders, when success turned sour and the cost of contempt. Carla's name became digital poison. Then came the second wave, the legal one. The footage, combined with signed affidavits and Emily's meticulous documentation, was enough to open a formal inquiry into elder coercion. A quiet but swift investigation began. The state's Department of Adult Protective Services reviewed the original property transfer attempt Carla had tried to orchestrate, using half-filled forms, verbal pressure, and language in her messages that strongly implied intent to deceive. She was summoned for questioning. At the same time, her employer, a well-known PR firm specializing in human-centered branding, issued a brief statement. "We believe in values that uplift and honor our families. Miss Dawson's recent conduct, both personal and professional, does not align with our core mission." She was terminated without severance. I heard about it from Emily, who brought me the paper with her name on the second page under the headline, "PR, Executive Fired Following Viral Scandal." I wish I could say I felt triumphant, but what I felt was older than victory. I felt settled, as if the weight had finally gone back to where it belonged. Then came the final fracture, the one Carla never saw coming. Her husband's family, wealthy and old money traditional, had always held her at arm's length. They tolerated her ambition, her curated image, her branding. But when the story broke, when their name began appearing alongside hers in the press, they acted quickly. A formal letter from her father-in-law's estate attorney advised that Carla was no longer listed as a future beneficiary of the Dawson-Greer Trust. The house she shared with her husband, owned by his parents, was put on the market, quietly, efficiently. Her husband moved into a corporate apartment the next week. When she called him crying, he did not answer. I do not know exactly how Carla reacted to all of it. I imagine denial first, then rage, then, maybe, though I doubt its reflection. But what I do know is that when someone builds their entire identity on appearances, the collapse is deafening and swift. She had spent a lifetime rejecting her roots, and now she had nothing to hold her down. Meanwhile, the Heather's Hands Foundation received its first 5 applications before the ink on the articles had even dried. One came from a single mother in Kansas, one from a foster youth in Ohio, one from a young woman in Detroit who had watched her grandmother build cabinets by hand and wanted to do the same. Emily read the letters aloud to me one afternoon. I did not cry, but I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, the way I used to when the smell of sanded cedar filled my lungs. Carla's world had unraveled at every seam: reputation, career, wealth, and legacy. And mine? Mine had finally begun to stitch itself back together, one careful, deliberate thread at a time. The letter came on blue paper, folded with care, each line written in a shaky but determined hand. Emily brought it with her during one of her usual visits, tucked beside the day's newspaper and a small box of shortbread cookies. She laid the letter on my lap gently, as if it were something fragile. "It came in yesterday," she said, "from Georgia." I picked it up slowly, the tremble in my fingers not from age, but from something deeper: anticipation, perhaps. Hope. The return address belonged to a town I had never heard of, but the name at the bottom, written in large, loopy print, was unforgettable. Naomi L., age 11. I opened the letter and began to read. "Dear Miss Heather, my name is Naomi. I live with my grandma because my mama left us when I was a baby. My grandma says I'm not broken, just built different. She teaches me how to use tools, even though I only got one good hand. We use a clamp to hold things steady while I work with the other. It takes me longer, but she says time is what makes things real." I paused, my throat tightening. Emily waited in silence. Grandma showed me videos of chairs people made, and she said there was one lady who built the best chairs in the world, named Heather. That's you, right? I saw your chair of love on the museum website. I want to make chairs too. Not just for people who can walk. I want to build chairs for kids like me. Strong ones, pretty ones. My grandma says, wood listens if you're gentle. I believe her. I believe you too. Thank you for building something that made me feel like I could belong somewhere. I held the letter to my chest for a long time. Later that afternoon, Emily sat by the window, her legs crossed, flipping through emails on her tablet. She got the scholarship, she said with a soft smile. First recipient of the Heather's Hands Foundation. She starts classes next fall. I nodded, still holding Naomi's words in my lap like something holy. Emily looked up from the tablet. And the chair of love? Yes, I said. She grinned. It has a new seat. I raised an eyebrow. A little girl from Bangor, wheelchair user, 10 years old, came to the museum on a school trip. Her teacher let her try sitting in it while they were between groups. The staff caught it on camera. She didn't want to get up. She just rocked gently, eyes closed, for almost 5 minutes. I exhaled, slow and deep. Emily's voice softened. They're keeping that photo for the exhibit. I turned toward the window, watching the wind tease the last of the autumn leaves. The sky had that soft gray hue Maine keeps before the snow returns. It reminded me of the color of walnut when it's just been polished, warm, unassuming, perfect. There's something I've learned about chairs, I said after a while. Emily looked over. They're only furniture until someone chooses to sit in them. Until someone rests, believes they'll be held. That's when they become something else. She nodded. That's when they become real. I smiled faintly. Not everyone deserves to sit in the things you build. Not everyone respects the weight of what you've made. Emily waited. But when someone does, someone who understands what it costs to shape something from nothing, to make room for others, that's when the seat gets warm. That's when a chair is no longer empty. She stood to leave, gathering her things. Before she walked out, she turned to me and asked, "Do you want to write back to Naomi?" I nodded. Yes. Tell her. The chair's always waiting. But she'll build her own one day, even better than mine. When she was gone, I reached for my pen. The room was quiet, but it wasn't empty. The air smelled faintly of pine and paper. I ran my fingers across the arm of the chair beside me, simple oak, old but strong. It wasn't the chair of love, but it held me. And for the first time in a long time, I let it. Thank you for listening to my story. Some chairs are built to last, but the real legacy isn't the wood or the design, it's who we choose to hold, and who chooses to sit beside us when the world turns quiet. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of someone you love, or simply made you feel seen, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, where silence becomes strength, and the quietest women finally get to speak. Because wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers. And when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.